Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to a special edition, First Sky Omaha Radio, First Sky Omaha in the morning.
In the morning.
Bear with us. We're going to wait till a couple of chat chimers come in.
Hey, right on cue. Right on cue.
Good morning, Leah Keister. What's happening? What's happening?
Come on in. Come on in.
Got a couple things to discuss this morning, so we're doing a special Tuesday edition. Abbreviated show, First Sky Omaha in the morning. Precious McKesson, good morning. Stepping all over your track again, man.
Man, you gotta let the jingle jangle, brother.
Jangalang, jangalang.
Yeah.
8:30 on a Tuesday, special edition, First Sky Omaha in the morning.
Continuing the conversations that matter to you.
Brother Valentine gives us the morning, fam. Good morning to you. Just gonna wait a couple more seconds here for a few more folks to jump in. We got a special guest waiting in the wings. A couple things to talk about that came to our attention. Mark Manor says, y'all scare me when you do this. It's like emergency broadcast system.
Hide your kids.
Yeah, that's good. This is good to test this out then, if that's the case.
It is.
Sometimes we'll have to do this. First Sky Omaha in the morning.
In the morning.
Paul Beee, Buddi3 Da Gawd. Special edition on going up on a Tuesday, October 18th, 2022. I'm glad that you guys are here. Wanda Lewis says, good morning. What's up? We're about to let you know. There's an article that's breaking in the Reader right now that we've gotten wind of this past couple of days and been talking about, and needed to wait until it broke, but it did break, and now we're here. And so we need to talk about it. Some things that came to our attention here. We also got a special guest in the wings so that we can talk to that person about it. This happens to be the person that wrote the article. Brother Chris Bowling from the Reader. So we'll talk to him in a sec, but in a minute. And first and foremost, Buddy, do you mind giving us a little gist of what's going on with the article?
Yeah. So I'll start by saying this is the byproduct of what we have built. This and not just talking about First Sky Omaha, but talking about the network, the infrastructure, the estate that we built. Again, journalists, news is the fourth estate, and we're here to fulfill that and carry conversations. And we ourselves are not breaking news, but we have built a very, very talented network and group of journalists who are doing the work in breaking news, and we try to bring them to you every Monday. And if you tuned in yesterday, you caught Brother Matt Wynn from Flatwater Free Press. And if you were paying attention, there was a story that he could not give us many details on, but he crossed his fingers a couple times in hopes that this will release. And it has released first on the Reader, because this is a joint effort between the Reader and Flatwater Free Press. So the article is now live on the Reader. You can go to thereader.com to read the article for yourselves. There's also a video attached to that as well. And then I do believe that it will be broadcasting. If not, it actually may be live right now. Again, this is breaking news. This is why we're coming with a special edition. This is breaking news. So it may be available on the Flatwater Free Press. That's flatwaterfreepress.org. Again, flatwaterfreepress.org. If you'd like to check that out, we just dropped a link in the chat. But this deals with the ongoing saga and more news coming out about drama in the Omaha Police Department. Again, if you remember last week or so, we covered the lawsuit that went out with Officer Gonzalez as she detailed that she received some discipline actions and some retaliation and some unfair treatment due to her just trying to do her job, as she put it. And apparently the courts agreed because she did win that lawsuit. And then following that, of course, we interviewed her husband, Greg Gonzalez, who is now running for Douglas County Sheriff. But now, to give you an update to this saga, we are receiving news that there is some information coming out from his opponent. And apparently Greg Gonzalez and the Gonzalez family is not done blowing the whistle. It may be a new sheriff in town, and it looks like that new sheriff is not wasting any time to clean house. If you don't know what I'm talking about, apparently there's an incident. And again, this is a gist. We're definitely going to bring in Baby Boy Bowling to give us the details. Again, Chris Bowling of The Reader is the journalist behind this article. But there is a video attached of Sheriff candidate Aaron Hansen in what is being deemed an excessive force incident. Apparently, this video has been swept under the rug or kind of been. How would you put it, Paul? I'm not quite sure. We've been hearing about the video, haven't seen it.
Yeah, this is basically a story. We'll bring Chris on to talk about it, but basically this is a story of a sheriff that has a video out of him using excessive force. He was supposed to be disciplined. He was on his way to getting disciplined for this, but then it got covered up and swept under the rug here. And now they've been thinking that this was the case for a while, and there's finally some evidence of this. And this is the first time that this is now dropping. Just dropped on The Reader. I just put the link in the chat there, and we'll be dropping on Flatwater Free Press coming up as well. So it involves a lot of people, and with as we talked about with us bringing on Brother Gonzalez and the race that's happening right now. The timing of all these things is really interesting. And in the midst of all the stuff that's going on here, we thought it would be important to get on and let people know about this ASAP, and I'll also talk to the chat chimers, see what you think. There's any other things to add to this as well, but that's basically the gist of the story that's happening right now. Like I said, we went ahead and put that in the chat for you to read yourself, look at yourself, and it's also going to break on Flatwater Free Press. And I do say we just had Brother Matt Wynn on the other day, and he kept saying I got something coming up, and he couldn't say quite yet.
Right.
So until some T's were crossed and I's were dotted and all that good stuff, and now it is. So that's basically the gist of the story, and we're gonna go ahead and bring on Chris Baby Boy Bowling, who is the responsible behind this, the person responsible behind this story, and he can give us a little bit more insight. We'll go ahead and show the video as well, since it's already out, and this is not break like Buddy said. This is us breaking this news. It's already been broke, but we really want to highlight what's going on here and talk to the chat chimers about it. So without further ado, Chris Baby Boy Bowling in the house.
Hey, how's it going?
Going good, man. And he's got a new microphone sounding like smooth like butter.
Hey.
Right on, man. Thanks for coming on this off day for sure.
Yeah, of course. No worries.
Yeah. So let us know. Give us a little gist of. I don't know how much justice we just did the review there, but let us know. Give us a little gist of the article.
Yeah. Well, so first off, I'm not the only one behind the story. It was me and Flatwater Free Press working in tandem on this. So definitely want to highlight that partnership. Couldn't have done it without them. But yeah, I mean, as far as the facts of the story, that was pretty accurate. So I mean, basically, there was a use of force incident in August of 2017 involving Sergeant Aaron Hansen, who's now running for county sheriff. And the incident was reviewed, and things get reviewed in a lot of different places in the police department. But one of them was this safety review board, which is made up of a deputy chief, a training lieutenant, and then another lieutenant. And they decided after seeing the video that Aaron Hansen should get a very, very low level punishment, which is a job performance interview, which is essentially like, your supervisor comes and says, look, what you did wrong. Let's, not do that again, sort of thing. And sorry, someone just like walked by and distracted me. So then once they made their decision, the police union president called Chief Todd Schmaderer and said, we don't think this is right. We want to see this, reversed. And one of the review board members kicked off the board, and I'll get to that in a second. But basically, Todd Schmaderer did that, reversing decision and taking the member off the board. According to the police department, they also say that he forwarded the video and the facts onto their internal affairs unit, which is another place that does internal investigations of police, and talked to their use of force experts, and they agreed there was no violation of policy. So the punishment was never carried out. And then the other thing, so the review board member who was kicked off the board, so he had a past with Aaron Hansen, in that he had wanted to get onto the police. He had one time been on the police pension board. He got beat in an election by Aaron Hansen to be the trustee of that board for the police. And I think Aaron Hansen beat him in a couple elections. And then he, was like, "Hey, Aaron, I don't want to keep running against you. Can you just recommend me for this position?" And the guy's name is George Merithu. It's in the story. He had the understanding he was going to be appointed to the board. Aaron Hansen didn't appoint him to the board. Merithu got really mad, sent an email where he expressed some hurt feelings. And so this was before this review board decision. So now the review board decision happens. The union and others, say this dude clearly had a conflict of interest. This isn't right. So and then he ended up getting recommended for termination in like 2020. He now has but he quit before he could be fired. He now has a lawsuit against the city, in which part of this, the whole review board thing is kind of roped into that. And then now, obviously, we've got the sheriff's race, and it's kind of coming up again because of that. But the overall, main message of the story really is around like police transparency, accountability, and just lots of questions about what's really kind of going on here. And if you read the story, there's lots of different people involved, interesting viewpoints, perspectives. So it is a very interesting story.
Definitely.
Yep.
And a lot of people ask the question, but we kind of give you credit for it because you pinned the article and the headline read, "Who polices the police?" And that's kind of there is, like you said, a lot of agendas. There are a lot of perspectives, a lot of people involved in this story, but I do want to, like you said, put that at the center of this conversation and why we feel like it's important to have here on First Sky Omaha, even in a special edition, because we're constantly asking the question, who polices the police? And as you just mentioned, there are several levels and several different checks and balances and stopgaps, but yet still this video didn't surface. It wasn't made public. This case I haven't heard about this story. So obviously it was swept under the rug. So again, that's at the center of this question: who polices the police? And adding the election into it, do we want our sheriff to be conducting in this type of behavior?
Right. I'm gonna so just to kind of contextualize it the way that I'm seeing it and looking at it. This is an important thing, first of all, because this is another video that's out where a law enforcement officer used excessive force. That's number one. Number one is we see these all the time. This happens, and it happens here in Nebraska, and it's happened. So and the reason why we really didn't get to see what was going on with it was because it was kind of swept under the rug, which now we can kind of maybe even expect a little backlash at it even being out. So this is I always talk about the news these days. I always say stuff like you it's the most gangster job you can have. You got to be a gangster to be a newsman these days, because if there's a war on news. There's always a fear of, when something like this comes out, when something like this breaks, retaliation, especially if it's about the police and the sheriff's department and the police union. There's always the fear that they're gonna mess with you exposing things that need to be exposed, because that's the question: who polices the police is always out there. The police think they can police themselves. They always putting review boards and stuff together and all this stuff, saying that they can review themselves. Outside review is always kind of something that they don't want. They don't want to have that, and they also, and not just do they not want to have it, but when somebody else does it, like the press, who's supposed to be doing it, who's supposed to be that entity that keeps eye on those types of things, they get messed with. So now we're stepping into this putting our money where our mouth is on this, because now it's like, people that broke news need to be protected. People that contributed to news sources, all kinds of, there's everybody around who's trying to call out what's going on. Even Brother Gonzalez, and his family, everybody who's calling out the police on anything. We got to remember that they now are going to be under scrutiny. That includes us sitting here talking about it now. That includes everybody. And all we really trying to do is shine some light on some areas that are not that are being put out in the dark. And so with this thing, this what struck me about this particular article here is not so much that there's a video out that this guy used excessive force, but all the stuff that went behind the cover up of it, all the threats, all these things that happened. Schmatter, from what my understanding, Schmatter was going to issue some kind of punishment. So that he's overruled by the board, and he's not, and that's not the first time that he's been overruled by the board. He's overruled by the board a lot, and the board,
Other way around. So the board made the recommendation. Schmatter is kind of the last stop on the train, so he overruled the board. But yeah, I mean, Greg Gonzalez and George Marathu say that it's only happened twice. The police department and the police unions say it happens a lot more than that. So we tried asking like how many specific times this has happened. I did a public records request of the board's decisions and outcomes, and didn't get anything on those two fronts. So short answer is we don't know. But yeah, it does go kind of back to that question of transparency and accountability.
yeah. I'm mentioning there's something to mention here about how Brother Gonzalez is his they're trying to question why he's bringing this up now. And is there any answers for that? Is there, I know that some of the evidence got broke recently, and that's part of it. What's the answer behind that? If you
Yeah, I
know?
mean, it just depends on who you ask. I mean, if you ask Aaron Hansen and people close or sympathetic with him, then it's they want to bring this up so that it's a political weapon, so they can take Aaron Hansen down. It's much ado about nothing. Basically, like this got solved years ago, and now they're trying to make a big stink out of it. So that perspective is very valid. The whole timing of it definitely goes toward that. The other thing is, that this never stopped being a point of contention, that, this happened and George Marathu kept kind of protesting it. And
Mm,
he argues that it's one of the things that led to his termination. And there's some other stuff in there too that we mentioned in the story. And then, Greg was a deputy chief. And so I think, to go off on a sidetrack real quick. So the police department wouldn't talk to us for this story, and give their input, but the
surprise.
police union president, Tony Connor, did talk to me, and he shared an email that Greg had sent 10 days after their decision in February of 2018, saying that there was no violation of policy, that the situation ended well, and that he'd consider the matter closed. Now, Tony Connor is like, that is evidence that this was solved back then, and now Greg is trying to turn this into a big political thing.
Mm,
Greg says, look, that's just the email I sent after the chief told me we're not going to do anything on this. And I still express worry about the use of force, but I'm happy that no one got seriously hurt. So you can, and then obviously the lawsuit with Greg's wife, that kind of is a whole thing there, and his relationship with the police department is kind of soured. And so it's I don't know if I can say one way or the other why it's happening now. The only thing I can say is that when I somebody gave me the video, and I saw it, it opened up a lot of questions, as Buddy kind of alluded to, of like accountability, transparency, and just to make sure that I was, not, just going off my own opinion, I brought it to the Flatwater guys, and we all looked at it and we said, this seems like a story that we should do, and that just led us down this very, you know, lots of different perspectives, all of them valid to an extent, and yeah, it was just very, very interesting. Definitely, probably one of the more convoluted stories I've ever reported. So
It's interesting. Brianna Fool is in the chat saying the sheriff's race is one of the messiest I've ever seen. If you need proof that cops are crooked and manipulative, just look at the races they run. That's really an interesting statement.
yeah, and actually, so we didn't include this in the story just because of like space, but I talked to somebody at TCU who studies sheriffs and sheriff races specifically, and she was saying that it's really not uncommon to have a very messy sheriff's race because unlike a city council member or a mayor or whatever, like there's only so many people who can really run for sheriff. Like you have to have like law enforcement experience to really stand a shot.
True.
And
Yeah.
so it's a very small community and they already have these, relationships built up and these animosities. And so they tend to turn ugly is what she said. So, but how they turn ugly is definitely unique.
For sure. Terry Crawford in the chat says Malcolm called it. Whistleblower chickens coming home to roost. Deeper roots to be revealed. Stay tuned for sure. Also, let's see. Also, Wanda Lewis says take a look at what they're doing to Greg's wife. It's taking years for her to get heard. Also, Greg is no longer with the police department, and they consider him an outsider. Very true. I'm looking at the article right now. Brother Terrell McKinney put some respect on his name. He says, I don't think the police can police themselves. Says Senator Terrell McKinney, a state senator who represents parts of North Omaha and plans to reintroduce a bill to establish more independent oversight of police. If the chief is going to overturn a situation like this, what else has he overturned? And that's kind of one of the questions that lingers with me for sure. A little bit further into the article, it started with a traffic stop around 8 p.m. For those of you that don't know about the incident, on August 31st, 2017, OPD gang unit officers pulled over a Saturn sedan near Northridge Drive and Craig Avenue, according to the police department spokesperson and the footage itself. The car's occupants were connected to recent gang activity, Hansen said in the interview. And again, I'm saying Hansen, and I'm remembering Hansen is the guy he's running against Greg Gonzalez in the sheriff's race. He was also what was his position in 2017, Chris? If you can
Aaron Hansen or
Aaron Hansen,
yeah, he was a sergeant with the gang unit, and he's still a sergeant with the gang unit. Or no, he's actually with the oh god, I'm forgetting, but it's basically picking up the fugitive task force, like picking up people on warrants.
Okay. So, and he's running for sheriff right now, which is the big thing here. So, he says Hansen, a North High graduate who became an officer in 1996, rose from patrol to gang unit sergeant. First appears 90 seconds into the police cruiser dashboard footage from that evening. The video shows 5 officers and 5 people handcuffed or otherwise detained in the driveway in Florence. One person in cuffs is leaning against the hood of the police cruiser. At the video's 7-minute mark, the handcuffed person tries to stand. An officer physically stops him. Hansen leads the person away from the hood of the cruiser. You're in my hood, the handcuffed person says to Hansen. Did hear the dude was mouthing off pretty good. Then the police sergeant knees him in the leg and watches him crumple to the ground. And then the kneeing is what people are saying is the excessive force.
While he was handcuffed.
While he's handcuffed, right. He says after the incident, Hansen's supervisors reviewed it and found his methods justified, Hansen said. His supervisor at the time, Ken Ganger, could not be reached by the reader or Flatwater Free Press. But use of force incidents are also reviewed by the Department's Safety Review Board, the 3-member group made up of the training lieutenant, and chaired by deputy chief, oversees a variety of police safety issues. While animated, the subject did not become verbally abusive towards Sergeant Hansen until after Sergeant Hansen struck the subject. This is the Marathu, the guy that you were talking about. Marathu wrote in a report obtained by the reader in Flatwater Free Press, it appears that Sergeant Hansen lost his temper and attacked the subject. Not uncommon for law enforcement officers to do such things, especially when they're in gang units and kind of have the opinions of people. If they think you're in a gang, then they got a certain idea about you, and they treat you certain ways. I know that for a fact from my own personal experience.
Mhm.
So these are some things that is not uncommon. We've heard of worse beatings in the street, but this is also excessive force, and people in their own department have decided that it was. And that's kind of what happened. I don't know if you guys want to show that the clip of the incident, or if that's enough. I'll ask the chat chimers. You guys want to see a clip? I always have to ask now because I don't want to see no more clips of cops beating up black folks myself. So I'll put it out there to the chat. If you guys want to see the clip, check it out. Or if you want to just look it up on your own, go to the reader.com and check and see and watch it there. Um, yes, you want to see it? Okay.
Okay. Few
So
more votes.
yeah, a few more. Yeah, we'll get a few more. So anyway, so then you walk into all the politics, all the rigmarole here, where Meredith gets
Mhm.
sued. He's trying to sue the city for wrongful termination, and so on. All this stuff happens, and then here we are later on, and now what we're saying is that what's come out, what the breaking news is, what the proof that you guys have found is that this whole incident got covered up because they basically said we're going to discipline this dude. They called back and said, "Nah, you're not going to discipline him. We'll sue you if you do." And then they buckled and said, "Okay, well, we'll just sweep it under the rug." Then is that kind of the gist?
Well, yeah, I mean, it just depends on your perspective. I mean, it could be that, or you could also say, hey, this Marathon guy had a bone to pick, and he went after Aaron Hansen, and this really wasn't that big of a deal, and they turned it into something it wasn't. So, I mean, it depends on your perspective, but and it is important to note that we talked to a policy evaluation criminal justice expert, Ian Adams from University of South Carolina, and he looked at the video, he looked at the documents that we obtained, and he said, this all seems right. You don't normally hit somebody in handcuffs if they're passively resisting, at best, which essentially it's police lingo for you know I mean, I don't know. Every department kind of defines it differently, but so it just depends on who you ask, like the perspective on like what this situation means. It could either be a political attack, cover up's a pretty strong word, but some people are definitely going to use that word. So it just depends.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very concerning though because in the midst of us talking about all this corruption that's been going on lately in the stories. Here's another example of something that seemingly got swept under the rug, and I mean that kind of is the fact. Really, it got swept under the rug. Now, whether or not it is, they decide it was justified, or whether or not if they were saying that his action was justified, is the reason why it wasn't a thing to them at all. Um,
Mhm.
but but people like us still want to hear about stuff like that happens.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
mean, it's something that like I would throw out there is like the reason that this story is pretty interesting is not because I mean it's interesting because of the sheriff's race, obviously, but the use of force incident itself. I mean, Gonzalez and Marithu, even say like, and in the SRB, the Safety Review Board, like reports, like it's not a egregious use of force, like it's
Mm-mm.
excessive, but this is not like when I talked to the South Carolina professor, he's like, I kind of like this because usually, when we try to talk about police transparency or video or whatever, we're talking about someone who got seriously hurt or shot and killed or tased or like some extreme
Right.
level of violence. Whereas this is not an extreme. I mean, I guess it depends on how you want to frame it, but it's not
Mm.
necessarily an extreme level of violence. And so it does open the questions of like, what should we know? Like, should this sort of stuff be public? Should it not be public? I mean, for what
Mhm.
you know, uh, the South Carolina professor said is like, I can't understand like, why this wouldn't be public.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's important to note now, that as part of all this, when the Reader and Flatwater Free Press reached out to the police department for comment. One of the things we did was we sent over the video and the documents of the review board that we had obtained, and we basically asked, if they were authentic or if there was anything, we should be suspicious of with them. And in response to that, they basically said we're opening up a theft investigation to find out how these documents got out. What we've been told is they're opening it with a third party agency. And so I don't know. I mean, that's all I really know about that. But it's just another sort of layer of like, because their thing is that these are private personnel matters, and that's why they don't release them to the public. And
That's the problem. That's the problem
yeah,
right there.
and
Mhm.
and so
The way they treat the public is not a private personnel matter, as far as I'm concerned.
mhm.
Yeah,
That's the
and
problem.
that's kind of what my line of thinking is, and where my mind is going. I actually have a few questions that popped up, so I try to keep it short. But my first question, and you sort of answered it, but just a quick yes or no. Take out the sheriff's race from this article. Just take out the whole sheriff's race component from your journalistic mind. Is this newsworthy? Like you said, it is
Oh
just a
yeah.
simple. Like, would you still write this article if we weren't in an election cycle?
I wish that we weren't in an election cycle, like sincerely, because it just adds too many complicated layers of this that I don't want to deal with. But we are, so you kind of have to deal with them. But yeah, I mean, that's the reason. If it had just been about a sheriff's race, definitely, I don't even know if I'm not saying I wouldn't have done the story, but it wouldn't have intrigued me in the same way, because this is a question about, accountability, transparency, what's sort of really going on. When we're told, that, we're a CALIA, which is, like a national accreditation thing, like gold
Mhm.
standard of policing, this and that. You don't have to worry about, citizen oversight because the police do a really great job of policing themselves. Like it's just kind of like, okay, so we're just sort of like supposed to believe these things because there's really not any way to find a vantage point to ask these questions. But this gives that vantage point, and like that professor said, we're not having to deal with like bereaved families and things like that because somebody was seriously hurt or killed. Like, all things considered, like Gonzalez said, it ended pretty well and that nobody
Mhm.
was seriously hurt. And so now we can really focus on the issues and ask, like, why don't we know about this? Is this normal? Should we have known about this? Is it bad that it's out now? I mean, it's people are going to have a lot of different perspectives. I mean, there's people that are
Right.
definitely going to see the story as just a political hit piece, and that's okay. And other people will see OPD as like a shadow organization. And I mean, I'm not condoning that, but everyone's going to have their own perspective when it comes to this. Our job, or the goal for this story, for me and for Flatwater, was just to try to be as balanced and fair as possible, get as much information out there so people can make up their own minds. And I feel like we did a pretty good job of that. It's yeah, so people can
Um,
make up their own minds.
Definitely think so too, and we appreciate you doing that. Just to
mm,
let people know, it's 9:03 right now in Omaha, Nebraska. If you believe in the concept of time, this is not a whole first Sky Omaha in the morning show. This is just a special edition, so we're going to wrap it up here pretty soon. We just wanted to bring this article to your attention for you to, like Chris said, make up your own mind on some of this fair and balanced reporting that's going on here. And before we get out of here, I know, Buddy, you had another question. You had something else you wanted to bring up here, and then I got one more question. Then we can go on about our day.
yeah, I just wanted to make sure in this conversation we are sticking to the facts and kind of getting to what I'm seeing is the nitty gritty of it. And I do want to take the whole sheriff's department, sheriff's race out of it, and stick to the fact that there was an incident. The incident went through the channels of review board. Um, the channels disagreed. One channel suggested disciplinary action, and according to the article, and correct me if I'm reading this wrong, Chris, but internal affairs called the chief and told him basically that this is justified, and the chief agreed and therefore cleared or declined
Yeah, I mean, according to their public information officer, he reached out to Internal Affairs, had them look at it with their use of force experts, and he got the message back that there was no policy violation. So that's what they said. I mean, I don't have like documentation of all this stuff happening outside of documentation about that
Well,
I've read in the
I'll
stories.
say this, and this is my final point. This incident happened in 2017. The discipline came later in 2018, correct?
Hmm.
So this takes me back to, when was Freedom Summer? Was that 2019?
20.
2020.
2020. Okay. As you mentioned, the Omaha Police Department said that they are the gold standard. They're recognized as some of the top policing in the nation. They don't need transparency. We've had several former city council members saying we don't need transparency. We've had several attempts to create a citizen review board, thwarted or not given teeth. I will finally say that this is, whether you agree with the excessive force or not, the way that this is handled is clear indication that we need an outside review board. And it is ridiculous that the Omaha police force think that is okay and we should just trust them to police themselves, but they won't give the community autonomy to police themselves as well.
Yeah,
No credibility.
I agree. Also, I mean, in the chat here, Carolyn Jack is saying, so the following line of thinking: I can assault someone for mouthing off, and it's not a crime. Really, when we're thinking about things like this is the kind of policy. This is the reason why there needs to be a review board, because this is the
Right.
kind of stuff they think might be okay, and within their realm of being what is it? What is it called? Qualified immunity, or
Yep.
what? Yeah,
Yep.
it was within their realm. You mouth off to somebody, you can get jacked up by the police, as if that's okay. Brother McKinney, put some respect on his name, is working really hard to reintroduce a bill to establish more independent oversight.
Yep.
Support him, back him for that. Because I'm walking away with this main question that he's asking: if the chief is going to overturn a situation like this, what else has
What
he
else?
overturned?
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
really kind of what it is. Kimber Snipes in the chat. I know I'm working on this race from an unbiased standpoint. This is about way more. I
Agreed.
believe it's about way more too. And I don't like this last thing that you just told us about. The police department might be trying to sue people for this evidence being out about it. It's just them kind of like running after running after the whistleblowers.
Yeah, I mean,
That's
as I understand it, it's not suing. I mean, this would be a criminal investigation of theft, and so
Theft.
oh
so
wow.
I don't know what all that means. So we're just gonna have to kind of see what happens,
Yeah.
basically.
But that was another point that I wanted to make, and I'm glad you brought that up, Paul. Going back to 2020, and how the Omaha police identified themselves. But from my viewpoint and what we've seen as a community is now 3 years of solid intimidation, whether it's internally versus their own officers, whether it's externally versus just protesters, people exercising their freedom of speech in the streets, or undercover, because we are hearing that there are people in the community who are afraid, who are kind of close to this story, who are in fear, a real fear of their lives and their safety because of this story. So that is pointing directly, and now we're seeing publicly that even the reader and the journalist, they're being investigated and possibly retaliated against. So again, if it walks like a duck, it cracks like a duck. It's not a mongoose.
Just a few more things in the chat, then we're going to let you guys go. Terry Crawford says raises more questions than answers for sure. Wanda Lewis says Wayne Hudson ran his race. He needs to take 10 seats down and stop being messy. Marianne Williams says we can look at it as a suspicious timing, but when folks are getting ready to vote, this is important info.
Yep.
Should he be leading a law enforcement entity with his history of excessive force and lack of transparency? Very good questions. This is exactly why we're bringing this up. Also, the force used, Terry Crawford said, the force used may not be excessive from the onset. However, George Floyd was stopped for an alleged counterfeit $20 bill and escalated to his homicide. Patterns, practices, and policies is the question, not individual acts.
Culture,
The culture, and culture. I'm sorry, but the culture of the police department needs to be looked at, regulated, and the people that they're policing needs to be the ones that have a say in what laws are being enacted against them all the time, and in what way. And that's what's standing out to me on this situation here. So this is just another reason for us to back Senator Terrell McKinney, put some respect on his name about trying to reintroduce a bill to establish more independent oversight of the police. I
Mhm.
think that should never be something that we let up from, because it's an interesting thing to me to always be, when they got beef, they act like a gang, and they
Uh,
got beef. They got beef. They use all their resources in order to get back at people with stuff. And I'm very sensitive to that now, because we're in the game that we're in. Like Wanda Lewis said, we don't want to get sued either, for telling, for exposing things that needs to be exposed.
right.
But
Right.
but we'll also fight with our fellow journalists and everybody else, because this is the news gang. That's what it is. You pretty much got to be a gangster to tell the news, tell the truth these days, especially when you come up against another gang that uses gang like activities sometimes in order to squelch things. All this that we are not stupid. We've known several situations where the police have acted like a gang,
Oh yeah.
and I'm from
I mean,
California, so this
no, I'm
you
talking about in Omaha, like trying to let it turn 11 and you still chilling downtown on in the old market. They are hopping out on you. They might mace you, pepper ball you. You don't know what's
intimidation
gonna happen.
tactics, all
Yes,
kinds of
yes,
stuff,
yes,
right?
yes, yes.
And
Those
all
things
kinds of
happen.
stuff that doesn't get reported all the time too, which is the main
Exactly.
part.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. And I wanted to clarify something I said and kind of in passion. As far as letting the community police themselves, I don't want anyone to misconstrue that to say we don't need police at all. But I do believe the community should have more autonomy and more say in how they are policed, and have some leeway to police themselves and handle some issues as a community, rather than having, as you said, a gang come in and brutalize us.
yeah. Any final words, Chris? Any thoughts? Buddy came up with a really great thing a few months back when he talked about us really looking into the how did you get the story, because
Yeah.
that's also a story. And every time we
Mhm.
ask the how, then when all of a sudden we get all this stuff like like the prison system is trying to sue people at flat water and so on and so forth. So like
Hmm.
your personal perspective on going to get this story, how did it happen? Give me a little behind the scenes of something that stood out to you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of like what I haven't already talked about. I mean, I guess one of the big things was, the collaboration stuff. Like, I mean, I don't necessarily want to call it a gang. I don't want to, be like, oh, we're in conflict with other people. But like, I'll call it a community. Like it's great that
A
like we're
network.
all,
A network.
yeah, whatever you want to call it. But I mean, like having, you guys to talk to, as well as mostly Flatwater, for this, like definitely mostly Flatwater, of just like, is this, and I mean I have to lean on them because like I'm a pretty young journalist, like and they have so much experience, and being able to get information from them and being able to be like, okay, yeah, so this is, I'm confident about this. If it had just been me, I probably wouldn't have been very confident. So I mean that's the wholesome thing. But yeah, I mean the public records requests being denied, not being able to talk to
Mm.
the chief, having to talk through a public information officer who was very, very helpful and like and transparent through the process. But the fact of the matter is that there's just a lot of unanswered questions. And then, yeah, hearing that there might be or there is a theft investigation is just like, I mean, I've never been subpoenaed before. I don't know if I will be. I, I just, I don't know. It's a very interesting situation and definitely a very unique story and the ones that I've ever done. But and yeah, there's lots of elements here of all these people who have different relationships and animosities towards each other, and trying to find the story at the center of it is challenging. And what people are going to
Mhm.
take away as the message is just going to depend on how they interpret the facts. And I hope that the story that we put out doesn't have any specific slant or angle, and that it just tries to understand what's going on. That's pretty much it. I mean, there's a lot
Yeah,
of time just spent behind my computer calling people on the phone. So
I mean it's newsworthy though who answers the phone for you and who doesn't.
I, w- I will I will say that, I mean, with the exception of the police department, and and Hanson's old supervisor, Ken Kanger, everybody wanted to talk about this. And so, I mean, like, Aaron Hansen was open to talking about it. John Wells, the former union president, took my calls to talk about it. Gonzalez and Marathu wanted to talk about it. So it's like everybody has something to say and they want to say it. And you can take that, you know, in a lot of different ways in terms of like, well, they're willing to talk about it, so they don't have anything to hide. Like, this was a poorly handled situation, and you know, this story shows that. Or I don't know. It's just about it's very complicated.
One thing I very much admire about journalism in general is the fact that you just be like, well, I'm just writing what they said. They said it. This is what happened. Draw your own
Yeah,
conclusions.
and there's definitely some accusations made by both sides that were like, and then I had to take it to the other side and be like, hey, this is what they said. And they're like, you know, I get some kind of, that is completely inaccurate. It's totally false. I'm like, I'm just saying what they said. Like, and so,
Right.
and that's highlighted the story where one side says something, the other side disagrees. And so
No,
you just got to
that's
make up
why
your
we
own mind.
That's why we got into this started for Sky Omaha, because we saw there were a certain amount of stories that had a lean, had a voice, had, you know, bias, whether it's, you know, conscious or unconscious. But, you know, I really appreciate just reading through the article, your effort to remain objective in this, and just lay the facts and the truth out, and kind of, as you said, let people take from it what they will. And I don't think it's too far-fetched to take that, you know, we need more transparency at the bare minimum from this article. There needs to be transparency, and whether this was excessive force or not, I think the public agrees that we at least just want to know. We just at least want to know, and then we can move forward and decide together as a community. But y'all just handling it behind closed doors, it's not a good look.
We're definitely going to talk about this again tomorrow. We have our regular show 7 to 9 tomorrow. We'll be politicking with P tomorrow, and also speaking with Kimra Snipes, who's in the chat now on YouTube. She will be on. We'll talk about what's good in the hood. She's making mention here. Interesting that Kanger and Hansen are the two I felt the most unsafe around. The two guys you were speaking of earlier in my many years of community work and doing my part with community policing. Wanda Lewis has a question I want to get out before we get out of here. She says, what does Tony Connor have to say, or is he flying under the radar?
Yeah, he's in the story. I didn't directly quote him just because of space and me and Flatwater decided not to quote him because of like space and stuff like that. But yeah, so his big contribution was that he gave me an email, and I talked about this earlier. So stop me if it's, you know, repetitive. But he gave me an email that that Gonzalez sent 10 days after the review board decision, saying that, you know, there was no violation of policy, that, you know, the situation ended well, and I consider this matter to be closed. And Connor is saying that at the time, you know, Gonzalez thought that the use of force was justified. So why is he out here now trying to make this big stink about it? Gonzalez says that was after the chief told me we're not going to pursue this thing. So I'm just trying to keep my job, basically. And I think the situation ended well because no one got seriously hurt.
Right.
And I thought the matter was closed. And that down at the end of the story, I mean, he kind of, at one point, he's reflecting on just like, why is this such a big deal? Like, why is the police department, you know, so scared about this story or whatever?
Exactly.
You know, his thoughts. And he, you know, ends it by saying like, they don't want that video to get out. And so now it's out and people can make of it what they will.
There you go. We definitely suggest that you go to thereader.com, and as a matter of fact, I'll put the article in the chat. Hit that link, check it out, watch the video, see for yourself. To get us out of here, Leia Keister says, thank you for all your hard work, Chris. Brianna, thank you for the good work, Chris. They're thanking you for doing what you do, man, and we appreciate it too. We call you baby boy, but you got to know, in the Black community, that's a term of endearment and respect in a big way. And you're, you know, what I'm a 49-year-old Black man. I'm looking at your young white behind out here doing the work in a real way, and I can't tell you how much we got your back. So I really appreciate you. Rome's Review says, thank you for getting some details. Have a blessed day, everyone. Appreciate everybody that jumped into the chat on this special edition Tuesday. Like I said, we will definitely be talking more about this tomorrow with Women's Wednesday with First Sky Omaha in the morning. Precious,
Yes.
Put some respect on her name, and Kimra Snipes put some respect on her name. We'll talk about this more tomorrow. and really appreciate it. Any final words, buddy, Chris?
I will just finally say, shout out to Senator Terrell McKinney, put some respect on his name. Brady Giglia list. We need that Brady list. We need that. Even if we don't get a review board with some teeth, we can at least have a list to know who has these types of incidents on their record. Again, as a public, we just want to know, y'all. Come on.
At the very least. No.
Yeah. Chris?
Yeah.
Any last words?
No, just thank you for having me on, and thanks for always having me on. And yeah, that's about it. Just thank you. And thanks to everybody for tuning in the chat. And yeah, check out the story on our site and Flatwater's site, and just look forward to more awesome collaborations between us, between Flatwater, between whoever wants to be a part of it. So that's about it.
Tell the truth. Shame the devil. Until next time. That'll be easy.
All right. Peace, peace, peace.
Brothers and sisters and friends, this afternoon we
the ballot
or the bullet.
The ballot
or the bullet.
The ballot
or the bullet. We need a self-help program. A do-it-yourself philosophy. A do-it-right-now philosophy. It's already too late philosophy. Once you change your philosophy, you change your thought pattern. Change your thought pattern, you change your attitude. It changes your behavior pattern. Then you go on to some action.
the ballot
Or the bullet.
the ballot